The day went quiet, they panicked. Not because they won, not because they didn't care, but because silence doesn't mean confusion. Silence means you saw everything, and they lost access. Toxic people don't fear anger. Anger keeps you engaged. Anger keeps you reachable. Anger gives them leverage. They fear the moment you stop reacting. No explanations. No defending yourself. No emotional energy left to drain. Because when you go quiet, their control collapses. This video is not about revenge. It's about something far worse for them. Irrelevance. Tonight, you'll learn 8 silent behaviors that strip toxic people of power. Without confrontation, without drama, without closure. No noise. Just quiet dominance. Watch carefully. What happens when you observe instead of react? There's a moment in every person's life when power quietly changes hands. Not when you raise your voice. Not when you finally explain yourself perfectly. Not when you win the argument. But when you stop reacting. Toxic people don't fear confrontation. They fear control slipping. They don't feed on truth. They feed on response. They poke. They provoke. They twist words. They cross lines just enough to see what gets a reaction. Because they're not communicating. They're testing. Every emotional reaction gives them data. Anger tells them where to push. Defensiveness shows them where you doubt yourself. Over-explaining shows them you still want approval. Nervous laughter reveals discomfort. Silence tells them nothing. And silence is the one thing manipulators cannot use. Reaction is data, and toxic people are professional data collectors. They study your tone. They memorize what breaks your composure. They store it and reuse it later. That's why arguments with toxic people feel repetitive. They aren't resolving anything. They're building a file on you. But then something changes. They provoke, and you don't react. They disrespect, and you don't flinch. They bait, and you don't rush to correct. They wait for the familiar explosion, explanation, or defense. It never comes. You pause, and that pause is not weakness. That pause is power, because the pause breaks the script. You stop being predictable. You stop being readable. You stop being automatic. Instead of reacting, you observe. And observation removes you from the emotional battlefield. You're no longer trying to be understood. No longer managing their feelings. No longer proving intentions to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You're watching, and toxic people hate being watched. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That isn't poetry. That's instruction. When someone else controls your reactions, they control you. Stoicism isn't about being cold. It's about being unprovokable. And when you become unprovokable, clarity appears. You stop hearing words. You start watching behavior. And behavior never lies. Why does speaking less make you more powerful? Toxic people are comfortable when you talk too much. They relax when you explain yourself. They feel safe when you justify decisions. They feel powerful when you overshare emotions. Because every extra word gives them leverage. Every explanation becomes material. Every emotional paragraph becomes ammunition. That's why intentional silence unsettles them. There was a time you filled every pause, rushed to clarify, defended boundaries like they were negotiable, not because you were weak, but because you were conscientious. But toxic people don't value conscience. They value access. So one day, you stop narrating your inner world. You still speak, but only when it matters. Short, measured, precise. And suddenly, your words land differently. Because loud people aren't intimidating. Controlled people are. Minimal speech creates psychological weight. A sentence from someone quiet echoes longer than a speech from someone desperate. Silence forces reflection. Seneca wrote, "I judge you unfortunate if you have never lived without witnesses. If you cannot exist without explaining yourself, you are not free." Silence becomes a mirror, and toxic people avoid mirrors. What changes when you stop explaining yourself? There's a painful realization in growth. The more you explained, the more power you gave away. Toxic people don't listen to understand. They listen to collect data. For a long time, you thought explaining meant maturity. Clarifying meant safety. But explanation gives access. And when you stop explaining, they lose the map. You state boundaries once. Then you act. No emotional cleanup. No reassurance. No negotiation. Silence forces reckoning. They replay conversations. They question themselves. They feel exposed. Because silence removes distraction. No drama. No chaos. Just truth. And truth terrifies manipulators. Why should boundaries be enforced, not explained? Boundaries are not built through persuasion. They are built through behavior. Toxic people are not confused by your boundaries. They're threatened by losing access. Every explanation teaches them how to negotiate your limits. So you stop. I won't engage in this. This isn't acceptable. I'm stepping away. Then silence. No follow-up. No emotional level. This is where power crystallizes. A boundary spoken once is communication. A boundary enforced silently is authority. Authority doesn't shout. It stands. Why do calm limits terrify toxic people? A boundary that requires constant explanation isn't a boundary. It's a negotiation. And negotiations invite control. Calm boundaries remove leverage. You don't argue. You don't justify. You don't defend. You reduce access. And reduction exposes character. Some adjust. Some resist. Some disappear. All outcomes bring peace. Stoicism teaches restraint, not reaction. A guarded gate doesn't debate who enters. It decides. What happens when your availability ends? Availability once felt like kindness. To toxic people, it felt like entitlement. Selective access changes everything. You reply slower. You engage less. You stop rearranging your life. Nothing is announced, but they feel it. They ask, "Are you okay? Did I do something?" What they mean is, "Why can't I reach you anymore?" Selective access isn't rejection. It's prioritization. You stop overgiving. You stop explaining why. And silence prevents negotiation. Your absence instructs. Why is being unpredictable so dangerous to manipulators? Toxic people survive by studying patterns. Once they can predict you, they control you. Growth breaks patterns. You stop oversharing. Stop announcing decisions. Stop explaining inner shifts. Your inner world becomes private. And privacy is power. Now provocation doesn't hook you. Guilt doesn't pull you back. Testing meets stillness. Unpredictability removes leverage. A mind that cannot be read cannot be dominated. You're not chaotic. You're intentional. An intention without exposure terrifies manipulators. Why is the silent exit the final collapse of control? Toxic people expect a scene. Drama is their oxygen. Reaction is their fuel. But silence means the decision was already made. You don't argue. You don't explain. You simply stop showing up. And absence forces accountability. Words can be twisted. Silence cannot. A silent exit says, "I chose myself and didn't need your permission." That realization cuts deeper than revenge ever could. Because revenge is attachment. Growth is freedom. You don't win by fighting. You win by outgrowing. Conclusion. Power isn't in raising your voice. Power is when you no longer need to. Your silence became your shield. Your boundaries became your armor. Your absence became the lesson. You didn't disappear into bitterness. You disappeared into growth. And that is why they panic. Because they didn't lose you. They lost access. Your peace is the consequence. If this resonated, comment. My silence is power. Not for validation, but as a marker. Your future self is watching. And they're proud.